Hey there. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Heather Sullivan, and welcome to Sullivan Smart Sense. Today, we are talking about making those holiday donations. With inflation, we're actually seeing donations are kind of down this year. So we want to help you make sure that donations to any charities that you want to support are really going to make the most impact when you donate those dollars this year. So joining me is the CEO of Direct Relief. This is Thomas. Am I saying this right? Is it Tig? Am I saying that right?
That's right.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being with us. First, let's just talk about Direct Relief for people who may not know what you guys are all about.
Well, thank you, Heather. I think Direct Relief is a 75-year-old nonprofit organization based in California, and we focus on providing essential medications and medical material to people who need but can't afford them. We're licensed in all 50 states to distribute prescription medications, which we do through community health centers and free and charitable clinics, many of them in Texas. And internationally, we work in about 100 countries each year, trying to make sure that people who need but can't afford essential medications have access to them. So it's operationally, obviously, we're sitting in a distribution center here that's accredited as a drug distribution center, so it's a warehouse, but the purpose is humanitarian health, in both ongoing and in response to emergencies as well.
It sounds like you do a lot of great work. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of how inflation is impacting nonprofits this year.
Well, I think inflation affects nonprofits like it affects everyone negatively, right? Each dollar buys less than it did a year ago. And if there's fewer dollars, I think it compounds the problem. So I think nonprofits like Direct Relief are focused on how to make their operations more efficient, how you can perform the mission, particularly in tough times where more is needed but less is available. It's a recipe and encouragement to look hard at how you're doing activities and try to squeeze each dollar even further. So for Direct Relief, it's a matter of looking at everything, including how we package and wrap and distribute material, looking for alternative distribution sources, and how we can kind of optimize the transportation, which is a big expense for Direct Relief, working around the world as fuel costs have gone up and now down a little bit. But I think every organization is looking really at from top to bottom, how they can squeeze pennies more efficiently. It's a bit more challenging when a large percentage of the costs are related. If you're a food bank trying to obtain food that's more expensive, anything involving distribution, obviously the transportation costs have gone up for the past few years. So it's a challenge, and nonprofits tend to be counter-cyclical, which means when the economic circumstances get worse, we're supposed to do more. So again, it does push us to look for ways to drive how to preserve those things of value with less money, but more mission need. And I think we're all doing that. Direct Relief and the other million-plus charities around the country are looking how to do exactly that.
Yeah, I know it's such a difficult time. Well, with the research that we're seeing that's showing 63% of people who donate are being a little more cautious this year because, it's such tight times. What would be your advice to someone so that they can be sure that the money they do give is really going to have an impact? How do you go about sort of choosing and making sure that you're choosing an organization that's going to use your money well?
Right. Well, the first and most critical thing is decide what you care about personally, and that's something no one else can tell you. I mean, that's a very personal decision, this wonderful act of generosity. So if it's animals or humanitarian health, as Direct Relief does, or the environment, that's your call. Once you decide what you care about, it is worth spending time to see which organization is going to make you proud of how they use your money. And to do that, there are resources for consumers like charitynavigator.org or charitywatch.org, or the Better Business Bureau's site called give.org. And those are geared for consumers to make better informed decisions about things like how much of your contribution is spent on fundraising or general management as opposed to programs. And it's good to do that homework once you decide what you care about. Also, I think many employers match employee contributions, which is a wonderful thing. So if you do select a nonprofit to make a gift to and inform your employer, many of them will match it dollar for dollar, which is an extraordinary lift for the receiving nonprofit. So that's always worth checking out. And finally, different methods of giving have different frictional costs. A gift through the PayPal giving fund, for example, $10 in means $10 to the charity because the PayPal giving fund absorbs all the transactional costs and fees. Certain things like the text to give method that Direct Relief has looked at, a $10 contribution might net only $6 because of the high transactional costs and fees that are imposed. So those are all worth taking a look at once you decide, if you're in a position to make a gift, what you care about, then you want to make it as wisely as you possibly can.
That's surprising. I hadn't heard that on the texting things that sometimes the fees can really add up and reduce that contribution. Is there kind of a good number, a good percentage that you would consider, is a healthy amount that a nonprofit should be putting towards the cause versus administrative costs?
Well, as much as possible. I mean, I think, Direct Relief's in the fortunate position of we don't have to use any of the contributed dollars for fundraising. We don't do a lot of it, but I think that's covered by a bequest that was made years ago. So we can pay for the modest fundraising with money that's interest earnings, but that's a real cost. I think if it gets over 20%, 25%, you start wondering what it is you're propping up. But I think that the websites, Charity Watch, Charity Navigator, they do have some of those standards of what to look out for. When it exceeds a certain threshold, it's worth taking another look at it. But I don't know off the top of my head what's a bad number. I think sometimes it's a necessary expense to get out there and be visible. So you don't want to necessarily conclude that a group that's spending 25% is doing something wrong. Sometimes it's the only way they can get in front of people and grab their attention.
Yeah, and is it possible too, because this year things are, more expensive, so to organize a fundraiser or what have you, we might see some fluctuations in some of those costs.
Right. No, and I think the employer supported things, and really, I think the advent of social media and people who, if they're big fans, even if they don't have a lot of money, the encouragement or just recognition, like you have a vote, even if you don't have money, to kind of signal that you really care about this group, or people who work there, they do good work. That does count for a lot because it's a validation for others in your circle that you're not in a position maybe to give money, but this group, and that does count for a lot for any nonprofit because you rely on public trust and people who know these organizations well, even if they can't give a lot or anything, that support does come through, and we love to see that. Even for people who aren't in a position to give to Direct Relief, it's great. We know they're part of the team, and that is meaningful.
Yeah. And you touched on this a little bit, but if people want to sort of be sure that they're helping their local community too, because you've got, national organizations and they have maybe local chapters or maybe organizations that are just very specifically locally. So if that's the case, then maybe you want to be dealing directly with some of the local chapters.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like your local school. I mean, thinking you can put your eyes on are sort of the easiest, and the people involved. It's harder when you get to be a national or international organization. And I think that for Direct Relief, we're very sensitive to that. That's why there's a lot of disclosure in excruciating detail. Literally, here's how we spend your money, what we spend it on and what we don't. And I think it's more important, I think, for groups that you are physically distant from and may not know the people involved. But in the local communities, it's always better, like your kid's school, or if you need a library, you know exactly where that money's going. Other groups just don't have that benefit, or they work in a lot of places. So it's worth taking some time, if you're interested, in looking at those rating organizations. That's what they do, trying to make sure that consumers are not just have their emotional strings pulled, but they can make both a thoughtful decision as well before they make a charitable contribution, which I think is the right mix.
Okay. And I'm going to show your organization's website. So if people want to find out a little bit more about Direct Relief, is this the best place to go?
directleaf.org has more than any reasonable person would want to know. It's got 75 years of history, but we do disclose a lot. And if there's anything missing, let us know. We'll get it up there.
Awesome. Well, Thomas Tighe, thanks so much for spending some time with us and not only telling us about your organization, but it was great advice to hear for everybody thinking about making a donation this year and wanting to make sure that their monies really make a big impact as much as they can during these tough times. So we really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. And thank you so much for being with us as well. We will see you next time here on Sullivan Smart Sense, and have a great day.